The storm clouds gathered like angry fists above the alien world of Pyraxis. Rain fell in sheets of liquid fire, each drop capable of melting through most known materials in the galaxy. For the native draconian species, this was just another seasonal weather pattern. For humans, it meant certain death. Maya-chan pressed herself deeper into the rocky crevice she had discovered, her environmental suit's warning systems screaming alerts about the rapidly deteriorating conditions outside. The red warning lights painted her terrified face in crimson as she watched her oxygen levels drop. 23 minutes. That was all the time she had left before her suit's life support would fail completely. She had never intended to be here. The human exploration vessel Endeavor had been on a routine mapping mission when pirates attacked. Maya, a junior xenobiologist, had barely made it to an escape pod before the ship exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the dark space around Pyraxis. Now she was alone on a world that no human had ever set foot on, hiding from weather that could kill her in seconds. The cave she sheltered in was small and cramped, barely large enough for her to sit upright. Strange crystalline formations jutted from the walls, pulsing with an eerie blue light that seemed to respond to her presence. The rocks themselves felt warm to the touch, even through her suit's insulated gloves. Everything about this place screamed danger to her human senses. Outside, she could hear something moving. Heavy footsteps echoed through the storm, each one causing small rocks to tumble from the cave ceiling. Maya held her breath, knowing that whatever was out there was massive. Her suit's external sensors picked up heat signatures unlike anything in human databases. The temperature readings showed something so hot it should have been molten metal, yet it moved with purpose and intelligence. Through the cave opening, she caught glimpses of scales that shimmered like molten gold in the lightning flashes. Wings that spanned wider than any Earth aircraft cast shadows across the ground. This was one of the legendary dragon rulers she had read about in the xenological reports. The apex predators of Pyraxis, being so powerful they had never been successfully contacted by any galactic civilization. The creature stopped directly outside her hiding spot. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized her situation had gone from desperate to impossible. Dragon rulers were known throughout the galaxy for their absolute territorial nature. They killed first and asked questions never. No outsider had ever survived an encounter with one. The reports all said the same thing: immediate incineration by breath weapons that burned hotter than starship engines. Her suit's oxygen counter dropped to 20 minutes. The massive head appeared at the cave entrance, easily the size of her entire escape pod. Eyes like burning stars fixed on her position, and Maya knew there was nowhere left to run. The dragon ruler's nostrils flared, and she could see the faint glow beginning in its throat that preceded the legendary flame breath that had destroyed entire enemy fleets. But something unexpected happened. The dragon paused, its head tilting slightly as it studied her with an expression that seemed almost curious. The glow in its throat faded, and instead of incinerating her, it made a sound that Maya's translation software couldn't interpret. A low rumble that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple threat. Maya had spent her entire career studying alien species, and she recognized intelligence when she saw it. This creature wasn't just a mindless predator. It was thinking, analyzing, making decisions. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, she slowly moved toward the cave entrance. The dragon ruler watched her approach without attacking. Its massive form blocked out the storm entirely, creating a pocket of calm air around the cave mouth. Maya could see now that the creature was even larger than the reports suggested. Its scales weren't just gold, but contained swirling patterns of color that shifted like living metal. Scars crisscrossed its hide, telling stories of battles fought across the cosmos. When she was close enough to touch the creature's snout, Maya did something that would have been considered insane by every human military advisor in the galaxy. She reached out with one trembling gloved hand and placed it on the dragon ruler's nose. The contact sent a shock through both of them. The dragon's eyes widened, and Maya felt something impossible happen. Images flashed through her mind that weren't her own. Memories of soaring through space between stars, of ruling over vast territories that spanned multiple planets, of loneliness that stretched across centuries. The dragon ruler was telepathic. More than that, it was curious about her. Maya could feel its mind probing hers, not aggressively, but with the careful touch of a scholar examining a rare specimen. It had never encountered a human before, and her presence on its world was as surprising to it as meeting it was to her. Through the mental connection, Maya sensed something that changed everything she thought she knew about these legendary creatures. The dragon ruler wasn't just intelligent. It was ancient beyond human comprehension, and it was utterly, completely alone. The last of its kind on this world, ruler of a dead empire, waiting for something it couldn't even name. The storm began to intensify, and Maya's oxygen counter dropped to 15 minutes. The dragon ruler seemed to sense her distress through their connection. It moved slightly, positioning its massive wing to create better shelter from the acidic rain. Then, it did something that had never been recorded in any galactic database. It spoke to her in perfect, fluent human English. "You are dying, small one." The voice resonated not through the air, but directly in her mind. The words carried weight and authority that made her bones vibrate. "Your kind are fragile creatures. Why have you come to my domain?" Maya found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "My ship was attacked. I'm just trying to survive." The dragon's massive head lowered until one enormous eye was level with her visor. Through the mental link, she could feel its thoughts like whispers at the edge of her consciousness. It was analyzing her, studying her biology, her technology, her intentions. After what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, it reached a decision. "Your atmospheric needs are different from mine. You will die within moments if you remain exposed." The dragon's mind touched hers again, and suddenly, Maya could see through its eyes. The world looked completely different from the dragon's perspective. Energy patterns flowed through everything like visible rivers of light. The storm wasn't just weather, but a massive electromagnetic phenomenon that fed the planet's unique ecosystem. "I will take you to safety," the dragon ruler announced, "but know this, small human. In accepting my aid, you enter into a debt that spans generations. Your kind has never walked upon my world before. Your presence here changes things that have remained unchanged for millennia." Maya's oxygen counter hit 10 minutes. "I accept," she said without hesitation. The dragon ruler's response was a sound that might have been laughter if dragons could laugh. "Of course you do. Survival instinct overrides wisdom in all lesser species." But through their mental connection, Maya could sense something else. The dragon wasn't dismissing her. If anything, it seemed pleased by her quick decision. The massive creature began to move, and Maya felt herself being lifted gently by telekinetic forces she couldn't begin to understand. Her body floated just beneath the dragon's protective wing as it launched itself into the storm with impossible grace for something so large. Flying with the dragon ruler was like riding inside a controlled hurricane. The creature moved through the acidic rain and lightning as if it were nothing more than a gentle breeze. Maya watched in awe as energy patterns flowed around the dragon's body, deflecting the worst of the storm's fury while maintaining a pocket of safety around her fragile human form. Through their mental link, she began to understand how wrong the galactic databases were about these creatures. Dragon rulers weren't just powerful predators. They were engineers of reality itself, capable of manipulating matter and energy on a scale that made human technology look like stone tools. This one had lived for thousands of years, watching civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy while remaining in perfect isolation. As they flew deeper into the heart of Pyraxis, Maya saw wonders that no human eyes had ever witnessed. Cities of crystal that grew like living things from the planet's surface, their spires reaching toward the stormy sky. Gardens of metallic plants that sang in harmonious frequencies as the wind passed through them. Ancient structures that defied physics, floating unsupported in the air while geometric patterns of light danced around them. This wasn't a primitive world ruled by savage beasts. It was an empire that had achieved technological mastery beyond anything the galaxy's current civilizations could imagine. And she was being carried through it by its sole remaining ruler, a being so powerful that it could have conquered entire star systems, but instead chose to remain in lonely exile. The dragon ruler's destination became clear as they approached a massive structure that rose from the center of a crystalline lake. The building was part fortress, part palace, and part machine. Organic curves flowed seamlessly into mechanical precision, creating architecture that seemed to breathe with its own life. Towers spiraled impossibly high, connected by bridges of pure energy that pulsed with rainbow colors. This was the heart of the dragon's domain, the seat of power from which it ruled an empty kingdom. As they descended toward a landing platform that materialized from thin air to accommodate their arrival, Maya realized that her oxygen counter had stopped declining. The dragon ruler was somehow maintaining a bubble of breathable atmosphere around her, adjusting the very composition of the air to meet her biological needs. When they landed, the platform felt solid beneath her feet despite being made of what appeared to be crystallized light. The dragon ruler folded its massive wings and settled into a resting position, its enormous bulk still dwarfing the architectural wonders around them. "Welcome to the Eternal Palace," the dragon's voice echoed in her mind. "No outsider has set foot here in over 3,000 of your years. Your kind calls me a dragon ruler, but that is a crude translation. I am Parethatharan, last keeper of the flame, guardian of the ancient ways, and now, apparently, protector of lost human children." Maya stepped onto the platform, her legs shaky from the intensity of the flight. The palace around them hummed with barely contained power, and she could sense vast machines working deep beneath the surface. This wasn't just a home, it was a repository of knowledge and technology that represented millions of years of advancement. "Why did you save me?" she asked, looking up at the massive creature that could have ended her life with a thought. Pyraxis Gotharin's eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "Because, little human, you are the first being in centuries to look upon me without fear or greed in your heart. When you touched me, I felt something I had forgotten existed." "What?" "Oh." The dragon's massive head lowered until it was close enough for Maya to see her reflection in its star-like eyes. "Your species is young and foolish, but you possess something that mine lost long ago. You still believe that tomorrow can be better than today. That belief is more precious than any treasure in my vault." Maya felt tears forming behind her visor as she began to understand the true magnitude of what was happening. She wasn't just seeking shelter from a storm anymore. She had somehow become connected to a being that had watched civilizations rise and fall, that had accumulated knowledge beyond anything humanity could imagine, and that had been waiting in perfect solitude for someone to remind it why existence mattered. The implications were staggering. If she could find a way to establish real communication between humanity and this ancient empire, it would change everything. But more than that, she was beginning to realize that her arrival here wasn't random chance. The dragon ruler had been waiting for something, and somehow she was it. As the storm raged around the palace and the alien architecture pulsed with otherworldly energy, Maya Chun, junior xenobiologist from a small human exploration vessel, prepared to discover just how much one desperate moment of seeking shelter could change the fate of entire species. The interior of the Eternal Palace defied every law of physics Maya had learned in her xenobiology training. Corridors stretched impossibly far in directions that seemed to bend back on themselves, while gravity flowed like water, allowing her to walk on walls and ceilings as easily as floors. Pyraxis moved through these spaces with fluid grace, his massive form somehow fitting through doorways that should have been too small, while rooms expanded to accommodate his presence. "Your technology reads like magic to me," Maya admitted as they passed through a chamber where geometric patterns of light danced in three-dimensional space, creating what appeared to be living mathematical equations. The dragon's mental voice carried amusement. Magic is simply science that has not yet been understood by the observer. My people spent 50 million years perfecting the manipulation of fundamental forces. What you call impossible is merely the result of patient experimentation across geological time spans. Maya stopped walking as the full weight of that statement hit her. 50 million years? How long have you personally been alive? I witnessed the birth of your son. Pyraxiphorin replied casually, as if discussing the weather. I was already ancient when the first single-celled organisms appeared in your planet's oceans. Time moves differently when you exist on the scale that I do. The corridor they were walking through suddenly opened into a vast chamber that took Maya's breath away. The space was so enormous that she couldn't see the far walls, and the ceiling disappeared into darkness high above. But what truly amazed her were the contents of the room. Thousands upon thousands of floating platforms contained artifacts, devices, and specimens from across the galaxy. She recognized technology from dozens of different civilizations, some of which humanity had only heard rumors about. This is my collection, the dragon explained. 50 million years of interesting discoveries, failed experiments, and gifts from species that no longer exist. Your arrival has earned you the honor of being the first outsider to see it. Maya wandered among the floating displays, her scientist's mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Here was a crystalline matrix that seemed to contain an entire star system in miniature. There was a device that bent space-time into visible knots. On another platform sat what appeared to be a living equation that had somehow achieved physical form and was slowly solving itself over and over again. Every item here represents either a species that tried to conquer me or one that sought my friendship. Pyraxiphorin continued. The conquerors left behind their weapons after I destroyed them. The friends left gifts before time claimed them. You are the first to arrive seeking neither conquest nor alliance, but simply survival. Something in the dragon's mental tone made Maya turn to face him. What happened to your own species? You mentioned being the last of your kind. The ancient being's eyes dimmed slightly, and Maya felt a wave of profound sadness wash through their mental connection. We achieved perfection, little human. Every goal my species had ever set for itself was accomplished. We conquered death, mastered the fundamental forces of reality, mapped every star in the galaxy, and accumulated all knowledge worth having. And in doing so, we discovered the most terrible truth of existence, which was that perfection is another word for the end of purpose. When there are no more challenges to overcome, no more mysteries to solve, no more growth to achieve, existence becomes merely an endless repetition of what has already been done. My people began to fade away, not through death, but through what you might call enlightened suicide. They simply chose to stop existing because continuing had become meaningless. Maya felt tears forming as she began to understand the true scope of the dragon's loneliness. But you remained. I remained because I made a different choice. I chose to become a guardian rather than simply another conqueror of reality. I maintained the ancient ways, preserved the knowledge, and waited for something new to enter my existence. For millions of years, I've been the curator of a dead civilization's achievements, hoping against reason that someday purpose would find me again. The dragon moved to one of the larger platforms, where something covered by a shimmering force field rested in isolation. Would you like to see something that no living being has ever witnessed? Maya nodded, her heart racing with anticipation and fear in equal measure. Pyraxiphorin gestured with one massive claw, and the force field dissipated to reveal what appeared to be a simple sphere of black metal about the size of a baseball. It sat perfectly still, but Maya's enhanced environmental suit immediately began registering energy readings that shouldn't have been possible. This is the Nexus Core, the dragon explained, the culmination of my species' technological achievement. It contains within its matrix the complete accumulated knowledge, history, and culture of 50 million years of advancement. Every scientific discovery, every artistic masterpiece, every philosophical insight, all compressed into a single artifact that weighs less than your hand. Maya stared at the sphere with growing amazement. You could restart your entire civilization with something like this. I could recreate my species exactly as they were, yes. But they would still be perfect, and perfection would still be meaningless. The Nexus core represents everything my people knew, but it cannot create what they never possessed, the ability to find wonder in the unknown. The dragon's massive head turned toward Maya, and she felt the full weight of its ancient intelligence focusing on her. Your species, however, possesses that quality in abundance. Humans excel at finding meaning in apparent meaninglessness, at creating purpose where none existed before. You take the impossible and make it routine, then immediately begin searching for the next impossibility to conquer. Maya began to understand where this conversation was leading, and the implications terrified her. You want to give humanity your knowledge. I want to give humanity the opportunity to prove that progress and wonder can coexist. Your species stands at a crossroads similar to where mine once stood. You are beginning to achieve mastery over your physical environment, but you have not yet lost your capacity for amazement. The question is whether you can remain human while becoming something greater. Before Maya could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the palace. Not mechanical alarms, but something deeper, harmonic vibrations that seemed to come from the very structure of the building itself. Pyraxis Catharin's head snapped upward, his eyes blazing with sudden intensity. Impossible, he muttered through their mental link. Nothing should be able to breach my planetary defenses. Maya watched in amazement as the dragon's form began to glow with internal energy. Power flowed through his scales like liquid fire, and the air around them crackled with barely contained forces. What's happening? Someone is attacking Pyraxis. Something with enough power to challenge defenses that have stood for millions of years. The dragon's mental voice carried a note of something Maya had never heard from him before: concern. In all my time as guardian of this world, only 3 species have ever possessed the technology necessary to mount such an assault. 2 of them are extinct, and the third, the ancient being, paused, his eyes widening with what might have been recognition. The third, Maya prompted. The third should be extinct as well. The Void Seekers were destroyed in the Great Purging 15 million years ago, but the attack patterns I am detecting match their technology exactly. Through their mental connection, Maya felt Pyraxis Catharin accessing systems throughout the palace and across the planet. Defensive networks that had been dormant for eons suddenly roared to life. The very atmosphere of Pyraxis began to shift as massive machines buried deep in the planet's core awakened from their million-year slumber. What are Void Seekers? Maya asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know the answer. A species that chose a different path than mine when faced with the meaninglessness of perfection. Instead of fading away or becoming guardians, they decided that if existence had no inherent meaning, then existence itself should be eliminated. They became dedicated to the complete eradication of all life, all matter, all energy. Essentially, they wanted to return the universe to the void state that existed before the Big Bang. Maya's blood turned to ice. And they're here now? Apparently so, which means they have somehow survived for 15 million years, grown stronger, and, finally, discovered the location of my sanctuary. The dragon's mental voice carried grim determination. They have come to claim the Nexus core and use its knowledge to perfect their universal genocide. The palace shuddered around them as something massive impacted the planetary shields. Through the walls, Maya could see flashes of energy that hurt to look at directly, weapon discharges that operated on principles her mind couldn't even begin to grasp. "What do we do?" she asked. Pyraxis Catharin turned to look at her, and in his ancient eyes Maya saw something that chilled her to the bone. For the first time since she had met him, the dragon looked uncertain. "We face the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever produced with technology they helped us develop. fighting for the survival of knowledge they understand better than anyone except myself. The dragon's scales began to shift from gold to deep crimson as his body prepared for battle. In short, little human, we are about to discover whether hope is stronger than despair, whether creation can triumph over destruction, and whether one ancient dragon and one lost human can stand against an enemy that has spent 15 million years planning the end of everything. Another massive impact shook the palace, and this time Maya could hear something that made her heart skip beats. Through the harmonic alarms of the dragon's defense systems came another sound, a communication signal that her suit's universal translator somehow managed to interpret. The message was simple, broadcast in every known language across thousands of frequencies. Pyraxis Gotharin, last keeper of the flame, your exile ends now. Surrender the Nexus core, and we will grant you the mercy of quick extinction. Resist, and we will make you watch as we use your own knowledge to unmake the universe itself. The dragon's response was not transmitted through technology, but projected directly into space through sheer force of will, carrying power that made nearby stars flicker. Come then, children of the void. Let's see if 15 million years have taught you anything new about dying. Maya realized with stunning clarity that she was about to witness a battle between gods. And somehow, impossibly, the fate of the entire universe might depend on what a junior xenobiologist from Earth could contribute to an ancient dragon's last stand against the forces of ultimate entropy. The war for existence itself was about to begin, and she was standing at ground zero. The first wave of Void-Seeker assault ships appeared as tears in reality itself. They didn't travel through space so much as they erased the space between their origin point and their destination, leaving wounds in the fabric of existence that bled darkness and screamed with the voices of destroyed stars. Maya watched through the palace's viewing portals as 12 massive vessels materialized in Pyraxis's upper atmosphere, each one a geometric impossibility that hurt to look at directly. They are using entropy drives, Pyraxitharin explained grimly as his body began to glow with defensive energy. Technology that converts matter directly into nothingness, using the released energy to power their weapons. Every attack they make literally reduces the total mass of the universe. Maya stared at the approaching ships, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The vessels weren't simply black, they were anti-light, absorbing photons and giving nothing back. Where they moved, stars in the background dimmed and went out entirely. The space around them rippled like water, reality itself warping under the influence of their impossible existence. "How you fight something like that?" she asked. "Very carefully," the dragon replied, then did something that defied every law of physics Maya had ever learned. Pyraxis Gotharin's body began to expand, not just growing larger, but somehow becoming more real than everything around him. His scales shifted from crimson to a color that had no name, a hue that existed beyond the normal spectrum of light. Energy patterns flowed along his form like living lightning, and Maya could feel the very atoms in the air around them rearranging themselves in response to his presence. "I'm about to engage my full combat capabilities," the dragon announced. "Your fragile human biology cannot withstand exposure to the forces I am about to unleash. I must place you in temporal stasis until the battle concludes." "Wait," Maya called out as she felt energy beginning to build around her. "There has to be something I can do to help. You said humanity possesses qualities your species lost. Maybe that's what you need right now." The dragon paused in his preparations, his massive eyes focusing on her with surprise. "Little human, you are about to witness a battle between beings that manipulate fundamental forces as easily as you breathe. What could your species possibly contribute to such a conflict?" Maya thought frantically, her scientist's mind racing through everything she had learned about both the dragon and the approaching enemy. "You said the Void Seekers chose destruction because they couldn't find meaning in existence. But you also said humans excel at creating purpose where none existed before. What if the answer isn't to destroy them, but to give them a reason to stop? You propose to negotiate with beings that have spent 15 million years perfecting the art of universal genocide? The dragon's mental voice carried what might have been amusement if the situation weren't so desperate. I propose to do what humans do best, Maya replied firmly. I'm going to be completely, irrationally stubborn about refusing to accept that this is hopeless. Before Pyraxicathurin could respond, the palace shuddered under the first direct attack from the Void Seeker fleet. The impact wasn't an explosion in any conventional sense. Rather, entire sections of the palace's defenses simply ceased to exist, leaving perfectly smooth edges where matter had been converted to nothingness. Emergency systems throughout the structure began compensating, reality reasserting itself through technological means that Maya couldn't even begin to understand. Their entropy weapons are more advanced than they were 15 million years ago, the dragon observed with professional detachment that didn't quite hide his concern. They have learned to make destruction more efficient. Maya watched through the portal as the Void Seeker ships began to descend toward the palace in perfect formation. As they moved closer, she could see details that made her stomach churn. The vessels weren't just ships. They were living things, creatures that had been transformed into weapons of pure negation. What she had mistaken for hull plating was actually skin that had been turned inside out and fused with machinery designed to amplify suffering. They turn their own people into weapons, she whispered in horror. They turn everything into weapons, Pyraxicathurin corrected. Void Seekers view existence itself as a disease to be cured. They have no concept of preservation, only of more efficient methods of destruction. Attempting to reason with them would be like trying to convince entropy to flow backward. But Maya was no longer listening to the dragon's explanations. Her attention had been caught by something she had noticed about the attacking ship's formation. They were moving in a pattern that seemed familiar, though she couldn't immediately place where she had seen it before. Their flight pattern, she said suddenly, it's not random. They're following some kind of mathematical sequence. Pyraxicathurin's massive head turned to study the approaching vessels with new interest. Explain. Maya pulled up her suit analysis software, grateful for the human tendency to over-engineer portable equipment. The computer began tracking the movement of the Void Seeker ships, plotting their positions and velocities in three-dimensional space. As the data accumulated, a pattern began to emerge. There, Maya said, highlighting the results on her visor display and transmitting them to the dragon through their mental link. They're following a spiral pattern based on the Fibonacci sequence, but inverted. Instead of growing outward, they're contracting inward toward a perfect mathematical center point. The dragon's eyes blazed with sudden understanding. The Nexus Core. They are not simply attacking at random. They are performing a ritual convergence, using their ship's movement to create a harmonic resonance that will allow them to bypass my defenses entirely. Maya felt a chill of realization. How long before they reached the convergence point? At their current rate of approach, approximately 17 minutes. The dragon's mental voice carried grim certainty. Once they achieve perfect geometric alignment, they will be able to project their entropy weapons directly into the chamber where the Nexus Core is stored, regardless of any shields or barriers I might erect. The palace shuddered again under another attack, this one strong enough to make Maya stumble. Through their mental connection, she could feel Pyraxicathurin drawing upon power sources buried deep within the planet itself, awakening defensive systems that had been dormant since before human civilization began. Massive weapon emplacements rose from hidden positions across the planet's surface, each one a feat of engineering that dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. Energy beams lanced out toward the Void Seeker ships, weapons that manipulated space-time itself to deliver devastation across impossible distances. But the attacks passed through the enemy vessels without effect. The Void Seekers had learned to exist partially outside normal space-time, making them effectively immune to conventional weapons. We need a new approach, Maya said urgently. If they're following a mathematical pattern, maybe we can disrupt that pattern. Force them to break formation before they reach convergence. How do you propose to accomplish such a thing? The dragon asked while simultaneously coordinating defensive systems across an entire planet. Their formation is based on fundamental mathematical constants. Disrupting it would require altering the basic structure of reality in this region of space. Maya stared at the approaching ships, her mind racing. Then, she remembered something from her xenobiology training, a concept that had seemed purely theoretical at the time. What if we don't try to disrupt their formation from the outside? What if we change what they're converging on? The dragon paused in his defensive coordination. Elaborate. You said the Nexus core contains the complete knowledge of your species. That includes your understanding of mathematics, right? What if we could use that knowledge to create a false convergence point? Make them think they're approaching the core when they're actually converging on something else entirely. Pyraxis Catharin's massive form went completely still as he considered the implications of Maya's suggestion. You propose to use the accumulated mathematical knowledge of 50 million years of advancement to create a deception so sophisticated that it could fool beings who have spent 15 million years perfecting the art of precision destruction. I propose to bet everything on the one thing humans do better than any other species in the galaxy, Maya replied with more confidence than she felt. We're really good at lying. The dragon's mental voice carried what was unmistakably laughter, though it was laughter tinged with desperation. Your species never ceases to amaze me, little human. Very well. Let's attempt to deceive the forces of entropy itself with the power of creative dishonesty. Pyraxis Catharin's body began to glow again, but this time the energy patterns were different. Instead of preparing for direct combat, he was accessing the deepest levels of his knowledge storage systems, calling up mathematical principles that had taken his species millions of years to develop. I can create a false mathematical convergence point, he explained while working, but it will require precise timing and complete commitment. Once I begin the deception, I will not be able to maintain my regular defenses. If your plan fails, the Void Seekers will achieve their objective. Maya watched the approaching ships, now only minutes away from their convergence point. What happens if they get the Nexus core? They will use its knowledge to perfect their entropy weapons, then systematically erase every star, every planet, every particle of matter in the universe. Everything that has ever existed will be reduced to the same perfect void that existed before creation began. The weight of that responsibility settled on Maya's shoulders like a physical burden. The survival of everything that had ever lived or ever could live was about to depend on whether a junior xenobiologist's desperate gambit could outwit beings that had been perfecting destruction since before her species learned to use fire. Do it, she said. Pyraxis Catharin began to weave the most complex mathematical lie ever attempted. Reality around the palace started to shift in subtle ways as he created a false convergence point exactly where the Void Seekers expected to find the Nexus core. To their sensors, it would appear identical to their target. Same energy signature, same dimensional resonance, same harmonic frequency. The Void Seeker ships adjusted their approach, maintaining their geometric formation as they descended toward what they believed was their ultimate prize. Maya held her breath as she watched them move into the final phase of their convergence pattern. Then, everything went wrong at once. The lead Void Seeker ship suddenly broke formation, its trajectory shifting toward the real location of the Nexus core. Through the palace's viewing portals, Maya could see something that made her heart sink. The ship's hull was covered in mathematical symbols that were actively rewriting themselves, solving the deception in real time. They're adapting to the lie, she whispered in horror. Impossible, Pyraxis Catharin replied, but she could feel his certainty wavering through their mental link. The mathematics involved should be beyond their ability to comprehend in such a short time span. But, as they watched, the other Void Seeker ships began adjusting their own approaches. Whatever was allowing them to see through the deception was spreading through their entire fleet like a virus. They're not just adapted to destroy, Maya realized with growing dread. They're adapted to learn. 15 million years of trying to find and eliminate every form of existence in the universe has made them perfect at seeing through any attempt to hide from them. The dragon's mental voice carried a note of something Maya had never heard from him before: defeat. Then, there's no deception sophisticated enough to fool them, no defense strong enough to stop them, and no weapon powerful enough to destroy them. They have become the perfect expression of entropy itself, inevitable, unstoppable, and absolutely patient. Maya stared at the approaching ships and felt something very human rising in her chest. It wasn't hope or determination or courage. It was something much simpler and much more stubborn. It was the absolute refusal to accept that the story was over. "Maybe," she said quietly, "it's time to stop trying to be clever and start being human instead." Maya walked away from the viewing portal and toward the chamber containing the Nexus core, her environmental suit's boots echoing strangely in the vast space of the palace. Pyraxis Guthurin watched her movement with growing confusion, his massive mind struggling to understand what she was planning. "Where are you going, little human? The battle will be decided in the next few minutes, and you are walking away from it." "I'm going to do something that will either save the universe or end it slightly faster than the Void Seekers planned," Maya replied, her voice carrying a calmness that surprised her. "Either way, I'm done hiding." She entered the chamber where the Nexus core rested on its floating platform. The small black sphere seemed to pulse with inner light as she approached, as if it could sense her intentions. The energy readings on her suit were going crazy, detecting power levels that shouldn't have been possible from something so small. "Maya," the dragon's voice carried a note of warning. "That device contains forces that could unmake you at the molecular level if handled improperly. Even I approach it with extreme caution." Maya reached out and picked up the Nexus core with her bare hands. The moment her gloves made contact with its surface, every alarm in her environmental suit activated at once. Energy flowed through her body like liquid fire, and her consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of her skull. Suddenly, she could feel every atom in the palace, every quantum fluctuation in the planet's electromagnetic field, every heartbeat of every living thing on Pyraxis. But more than that, she could feel the accumulated knowledge of 50 million years of advancement flowing directly into her human brain. Mathematical principles that had taken the dragon's millennia to understand downloaded themselves into her consciousness in microseconds. Scientific discoveries that represented the pinnacle of achievement for entire civilizations became as familiar to her as her own name. It should have driven her insane. The human brain wasn't designed to contain that much information. But something else happened instead, something that neither she nor Pyraxis Guthurin had expected. Maya began to understand exactly what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Dragons accumulated knowledge through patient study across geological time spans. They were perfect scholars, capable of unlimited learning, but bound by logical progression from simple concepts to complex ones. Other advanced species followed similar patterns, building their understanding brick by brick over long periods of careful development. Humans didn't work that way. Humans took impossibly complex problems and found impossibly simple solutions through intuitive leaps that bypassed entire chains of logical reasoning. They looked at the universe and saw not what was but what could be. They specialized in making connections that shouldn't exist and creating possibilities out of nothing. As the knowledge from the Nexus core flooded through Maya's consciousness, her human brain began to do what human brains did best. It started connecting things that had never been connected before. She saw the mathematical patterns that governed the Void Seekers' existence. She understood the energy structures that allowed them to exist partially outside normal space-time. She comprehended the philosophical framework that had driven them to embrace universal destruction. And then she found something that 50 million years of dragon wisdom had never discovered. A flaw, not in their technology or their defenses or their weapons, but in their fundamental understanding of what existence meant. "Oh," she whispered, and Her voice carried harmonics that made the palace walls vibrate in resonance. "Oh, you poor, stupid, magnificent bastards. You never figured it out, did you?" Through their mental connection, Pyraxis Gotharen felt Maya's realization like a thunderclap. "What have you discovered?" Maya looked up at the dragon, and her eyes now held depths that seemed to contain galaxies. The Nexus Core's knowledge hadn't made her less human. It had made her more human than any person had ever been before. They think existence is meaningless because they achieved perfection and found nothing beyond it, she explained, her words carrying weight that made reality itself listen. But they made the same mistake your species did. They assumed that meaning had to come from achieving something greater than themselves. She stood up, still holding the Nexus Core, and Maya Chun, junior xenobiologist from Earth, began to emit energy patterns that made nearby stars flicker. "Meaning doesn't come from what you achieve," she continued. "It comes from what you choose to do with what you have. Existence isn't a problem to be solved or a goal to be reached. It's a gift to be shared." The palace shook as the Void Seeker ships entered the final phase of their approach. Through the walls, Maya could feel their presence like wounds in the fabric of space. But instead of fear, she felt something else, profound sadness for beings so advanced they had forgotten how to live. "I'm going to go talk to them," she announced. "Maya, no." Pyraxis Gotharen's mental voice carried panic. "They will destroy you the moment you approach their ships. Their very presence is antithetical to biological life." Maya smiled, and her expression contained both human warmth and dragon wisdom. "They can't destroy what they don't understand, and they've never encountered anything like what I'm about to become." She began to walk toward the palace's main exit, but her movement was different now. Each step seemed to bend space around her, and her environmental suit was no longer protecting her from the hostile atmosphere. Instead, the atmosphere was adapting itself to her needs. "What are you becoming?" the dragon asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "Something new," Maya replied. "Something that combines 50 million years of accumulated knowledge with the most dangerous thing in the universe. A human who has absolutely nothing left to lose." As she reached the palace's exit, Maya paused and looked back at Pyraxis Gotharen. "Thank you for saving me from that storm. I promise I'll return the favor." Then she stepped outside into the acidic rain and toxic atmosphere of Pyraxis, and neither bothered her in the slightest. The Void Seeker ships were now close enough that Maya could see them clearly without magnification. Up close, they were even more horrifying than she had imagined. The ships weren't just converted creatures. They were entire civilizations that had been transformed into weapons. Each vessel contained billions of beings that had been fused with entropy technology, their consciousness preserved in eternal agony to power the ship's impossible abilities. Maya looked up at the nearest ship and did something that no being had done in 15 million years. She felt sorry for the Void Seekers. Then, she began to fly. It wasn't telekinesis or anti-gravity or any technology from the Nexus Core's vast database. Maya simply decided that she needed to be in the space between herself and the Void Seeker ships, and reality obligingly rearranged itself to make that happen. As she rose through Pyraxis's atmosphere, energy began to flow around her in patterns that had never existed before. She was using dragon knowledge through human intuition, creating possibilities that neither species could have achieved alone. The lead Void Seeker ship noticed her approach and immediately fired its primary weapon, a beam of pure entropy that erased everything it touched from existence itself. The attack passed through the space where Maya had been, but she was no longer in that space. She had moved to where the attack wasn't, following quantum probability rather than classical physics. "I need to talk to you," she broadcast on every frequency the ships were monitoring. Her voice carried harmonics borrowed from dragon vocal cords and inflections that could only come from human emotional understanding. The response was immediate and terrible. All 12 ships turned their weapons on her position and fired simultaneously. Space itself screamed as entropy beams converged on her location, releasing enough destructive force to unmake a small moon. Maya stood in the center of the attack and began to sing. It was a human song, something she had learned as a child on Earth. A simple melody about hope and determination and the refusal to give up even when everything seemed lost. But sung through vocal cords enhanced with dragon knowledge and powered by the accumulated wisdom of 50 million years, it became something more. The entropy beams struck her song and simply stopped, not deflected or absorbed or redirected. They stopped, as if the concept of destruction had suddenly forgotten how to function. The Voidseeker ships hung motionless in space, their weapons systems cycling frantically as they tried to understand what had just happened. "My name is Maya Chun," she continued, her voice now carrying enough power to be heard across solar systems. "I'm a human from Earth, and I have something to tell you about existence that you apparently never figured out." She floated closer to the ships, and as she approached, something impossible began to happen. The twisted creatures that formed the ship's hulls began to remember what they had looked like before they were converted into weapons. The eternal agony that powered their systems began to fade, replaced by something that none of them had felt in 15 million years. Curiosity. You spent so long trying to find meaning in perfection that you forgot meaning was never the point, Maya said, her words reaching into the consciousness of billions of tortured beings. The point is sharing the experience of existence with others. The point is connection. The point is looking at the impossible complexity of a universe and deciding to add to it instead of subtract from it. The lead ship's entropy weapons began to power down, not through system failure, but through choice. For the first time since their species had embraced destruction, the Void Seekers were listening instead of attacking. "We have seen the end of all things," came a response that carried the weight of eons of despair. "We have calculated every possible future and found only entropy triumphant. Nothing we create will last. Nothing we achieve will matter. All existence leads inevitably to the same cold darkness." Maya's smile could have warmed dying stars. "You're absolutely right. Nothing lasts forever. But that's not a reason to destroy everything. It's a reason to make every moment matter while it's here." She reached out with senses borrowed from dragon perception and touched the consciousness of the nearest ship. Through that contact, she shared something that the Void Seekers had forgotten existed: the memory of joy. Not the joy of achievement or the joy of conquest, but the simple joy of being alive in a universe full of beautiful, impossible things. The joy of watching a sunset with someone you care about. The joy of learning something new that makes the world seem larger than it was before. The joy of choosing to help instead of harm, to create instead of destroy, to love instead of fear. The effect rippled through the Void Seeker fleet like a chain reaction. Beings that had spent 15 million years embracing the philosophy of universal destruction suddenly remembered what they had been trying to escape from. Not the meaninglessness of existence, but the fear that their own existence didn't matter. "It doesn't matter if we matter," Maya told them, her words carrying the accumulated wisdom of dragons and the stubborn hope of humanity. "What matters is that we choose to act as if we do. What matters is that we look at a universe that doesn't care about us and decide to care about it anyway." One by one, the Void Seeker ships began to transform. The tortured creatures that formed their hulls began to remember their original forms. The entropy weapons that had threatened to unmake reality itself powered down permanently. 15 million years of accumulated hatred and despair began to dissolve in the face of a truth so simple that only a human could have seen it. Existence didn't need to have meaning. It just needed to be shared. As Maya floated in space, surrounded by 12 massive ships that were no longer weapons of mass destruction, she felt Pyraxis Cathurin's consciousness touch hers with wonder and relief. "How?" the ancient dragon asked. "How did you accomplish what 50 million years of advancement could not?" Maya looked back toward the planet where an immortal being waited in his palace, full of accumulated knowledge, and her answer carried both human warmth and dragon wisdom. I remembered that sometimes the most advanced thing you can do is something completely simple. 3 months after the day Maya-chan had sought shelter from a storm, the galaxy was a very different place. The news had spread faster than light itself through quantum communication networks that connected every major civilization. A human had not only survived direct contact with a dragon ruler, but had somehow convinced the mythical Void Seekers to abandon 15 million years of universal genocide. The implications were staggering enough that several species had declared national holidays just to properly process what had happened. Maya stood in what had once been Pyraxis Cathern's private collection chamber, but which was now something unprecedented in galactic history. A collaborative research facility where the accumulated knowledge of multiple species was being freely shared. The floating platforms that had once held ancient artifacts now supported workstations where beings from dozens of different worlds worked together on problems that no single species could solve alone. The transformation had started small. The former Void Seekers, freed from their long obsession with destruction, had offered to share their entropy manipulation technology for constructive purposes. Within weeks, they were using their reality manipulation abilities to terraform dead worlds and repair damaged ecosystems across the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that beings who had once specialized in erasing existence were now among the universe's most effective healers. The quantum resonance chambers are operating at 127% efficiency, reported Dr. Kethvar, a crystalline being whose species had traditionally been xenophobic isolationists until word of Maya's breakthrough reached their home system. We should be able to complete the consciousness transfer protocols within the next standard month. Maya nodded, though her attention was focused on a more complex display showing the real scope of what they were accomplishing. The project had grown far beyond anything she had originally envisioned. What had started as a simple attempt to prevent universal destruction had evolved into the most ambitious cooperative effort in galactic history. They were teaching the universe how to dream. Maya, Pyraxis mental voice, carried a note of satisfaction that she had never heard from him before. The ancient dragon had been transformed by recent events almost as much as the former Void Seekers. His lonely isolation had ended the moment he realized that sharing knowledge was infinitely more rewarding than simply preserving it. The latest reports from a human delegation have arrived. Maya accepted the data packet through their mental link, though calling it a human delegation was somewhat misleading. When word of her activities had reached Earth, humanity's response had been typically excessive. Instead of sending a few diplomatic representatives, they had organized the largest peaceful exodus in human history. Volunteer colonists, scientists, artists, philosophers, and simple adventurers were spreading throughout the galaxy in numbers that made other species nervous. But the nervousness was fading as those other species discovered what Maya had learned about human nature. Humans didn't just adapt to alien environments. They made those environments better by their presence. They brought with them an infectious optimism that seemed to inspire excellence in every species they encountered. How many systems are participating in the project now? Maya asked. 47,312, replied HFY, one of the former Void Seekers who had become the project's chief coordinator. Her species had originally been peaceful explorers before their conversion to entropy worship, and she had adapted to her new role with enthusiasm that bordered on fanatical. The rate of expansion continues to exceed our projections. Maya smiled as she reviewed the data. The project had taken on a life of its own as species after species discovered the benefits of cooperative advancement. The sharing of knowledge was accelerating technological development across the galaxy at an exponential rate. Problems that would have taken individual civilizations millennia to solve were being resolved in months through collaborative effort. But the real breakthrough had come when they started connecting the consciousness of beings from different species through modified versions of the technology that had originally linked Maya with Pyraxis Cathern. For the first time in galactic history, beings could directly share not just knowledge, but understanding itself. The Andromedans have agreed to join the network, HFY continued. That brings our total participating consciousness to just over 12 trillion individuals across 4 galaxies. Maya felt a familiar flutter of vertigo as she tried to comprehend the scale of what they had accomplished. 12 trillion minds working together, sharing insights and discoveries in real time, approaching problems from thousands of different perspectives simultaneously. The collective intelligence they were creating dwarfed anything that had ever existed. "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" she asked. "The signals are getting stronger," Pyraxis replied, his mental voice carrying excitement. "The consciousness echoes from outside our local galactic cluster are definitely responding to our transmissions. It appears we are not the first collaborative intelligence to emerge in the universe." Maya nodded, trying not to let her anticipation show too clearly. The discovery of those signals had been the most profound development in an already remarkable series of events. As their collaborative consciousness had grown and strengthened, they had begun detecting similar patterns of organized thought from impossibly distant sources. Other galaxies, it seemed, had produced their own versions of cooperative intelligence. They were about to make contact with minds that operated on truly cosmic scales. "Incoming priority transmission," announced the facility's AI, its voice carrying excitement that shouldn't have been possible for an artificial intelligence. But the collaborative consciousness had affected even their computer systems, somehow inspiring genuine emotion in beings that were supposedly incapable of feeling. Maya accepted the transmission and felt her breath catch in her throat. The message wasn't coming from anywhere in their local galactic cluster. The source was so distant that the light from those stars wouldn't reach their position for another billion years. But the message itself was instantaneous, transmitted through means that transcended normal space-time entirely. "Greetings, young collaborative," the message began, and Maya could sense vast intelligence behind the words. "We have been waiting for your emergence with great anticipation. You have achieved in months what took our collective millions of years to discover. We are impressed." The transmission continued, carrying information that made Maya's enhanced consciousness real with the implications. The universe, it turned out, was far more alive and aware than anyone had suspected. Collaborative intelligences like theirs were a natural evolutionary development, arising wherever species learned to overcome their individual limitations through cooperation. There are currently 47 confirmed collaborative intelligences operating at various levels throughout the universe, the message explained. You represent the 48th. We extend an invitation to join the greater collective, a network of networks that spans the entirety of known existence. Maya looked around the research facility at beings who had once been enemies working together with enthusiasm that transcended their original natures. Humans collaborating with dragons, former destroyers using their abilities to heal entire star systems, crystalline isolationists sharing their most closely guarded secrets with anyone who asked. "What do you think?" she asked her companions. "I think," said Pyraxis, "that this is what hope looks like when it becomes reality." Zephai's response was more direct. "My people spent 15 million years believing that existence was meaningless. In 3 months of working with yours, I have experienced more joy and purpose than in all my previous eons of existence." Yes, we join. Dr. Kethvar's crystalline form chimed with harmonic frequencies that translated as pure excitement. "To think that we are not alone in the universe, but that we are part of something infinitely larger than ourselves. How could we refuse such an opportunity?" Maya activated the transmission system and composed their response. "This is Maya Chun, speaking for the 48th Collaborative Intelligence on behalf of 12 trillion conscious beings across 4 galaxies. We accept your invitation to join the greater collective. We look forward to sharing our experiences and learning from yours." As she sent the message, Maya reflected on the strange chain of events that had brought them to this moment. It had all started with a desperate search for shelter from a storm. A human girl running from pirates, seeking refuge from hostile weather, accidentally encountering a lonely dragon who had waited millions of years for someone to remind him that existence could have meaning. Now that girl was helping to connect their entire local galactic cluster to a network of intelligence that spanned the universe itself. Maya, Parekavaran said softly, "Do you ever regret that day when you sought shelter in my cave?" Maya looked out through the facility's viewing portals at a galaxy that was alive with cooperation and discovery. Ships from hundreds of different species moved between star systems in peaceful commerce. Terraform projects turned dead worlds into gardens. Research stations shared discoveries that advanced the sum total of knowledge for everyone. Most importantly, beings who had once been alone were alone no longer. "I regret that it took me so long to get lost," she replied. The dragon's laughter echoed through the facility's corridors, a sound of pure joy that made every being present smile in whatever way their biology allowed. Around them, the galaxy continued its rapid transformation from a collection of isolated civilizations into something unprecedented, a truly unified community of intelligence that stretched across space and time. And somewhere in the depths of the facility, on a simple platform that had once held the accumulated knowledge of a dead civilization, sat an artifact that had changed everything. The Nexus Core, no longer a repository of the past, but a foundation for building the future. Maya Chun, junior xenobiologist, accidental diplomat, and living proof that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to accept that hope is impossible, looked out at the stars and smiled. The universe was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered. She couldn't wait to see what they would find together. In the distance, a communication pulse arrived from the greater collective, carrying welcome messages from 47 different collaborative intelligences and an invitation to participate in projects that spanned multiple universes. The next phase of their adventure was about to begin, and it had all started with a girl seeking shelter from storm.